After learning that Will can't use magic and instead uses a sword, Edward goes to meet Headmistress Cauldron. Edward immediately demands that Will should be expelled. Cauldron tries to avoid expelling Will at all costs. However, Edward implies that it's absurd for Will, who can't even use basic magic, to want to become a Magica Vende. He also expresses his anger at Will's absurd dream. Left with no other choice, Cauldron gives Edward permission to test Will. She also implies that if Will fails his test, she will let Edward decide whether to expel Will or not. With that being said, Edward heads to confront Will. Edward then lures Will to Spellhall. Edward implies that he is going to give Will a supplemental lesson. Then Edward gives Will an assignment to land a single strike on him. If he succeeds, he will be given 5 credits. Needless to say, if he fails, he will be expelled. Thus, Edward prepares to launch an attack on Will. Meanwhile, Will helplessly dodges Edward's attacks. Well, Will has no other choice, since he doesn't have his sword to defend himself. By the way, Edward is known as the Dark Vipermage, and he is also the closest to actually becoming a Magica Vende. At first, it seems that Will has no chance of winning against Edward. Even Will understands the difference in their strength.
Dodge.
Then, Edward unleashes a barrage of attacks. Darbykins? Wait, how do you pronounce this? Edward implies that if Will can't overcome someone like him, then he would never become a Magica Vende. Edward then stomps on Will and tells him that a sword will never reach a wand. And the Best Teacher of the Year award goes to...
Bruh.
After all, who doesn't like a teacher who bullies and humiliates you? But Will firmly declares that he wants to reach the Magica Vende, no matter what. Then he tells Edward that he wants to reach the top of the tower because he wants to be with the person he loves, in other words, Elfaria. Meanwhile, Colette gives Will his sword. With that being said, Will finally decides to take on Edward. But this time, Will slices through Edward's magic. Despite being scared, Will continues to fight back. Meanwhile, Edward launches countless attacks. Thus, Will manages to land a hit on Edward.